It is Friday, May 9th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another On the Beach episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The May Essential games are now live on PSN, so you can go ahead and claim those. And going into our first story, let's talk about this new widget on the PS5 Welcome Hub, where right now it's in beta, so unless you signed up for the beta program and got accepted, then you will not have access to this, but probably wouldn't take too long for this to go live for everybody. But it is a recently played widget, so a very handy tool showing you the games you've recently launched, and it gives you a brief breakdown of game progress, trophies, rarest trophy, time played, friends that played that game, and captures. You can cycle through all these games with L1 and R1, and there's also a weekly roundup showing you the number of games that you did play, the most played, separate sessions, and also total time played for that week as well. And you can launch the game with square from there, or just hit X, and you can resize it with the small, medium, large options. Not a big difference between medium and large, but yeah, another new widget coming, which is nice to see. I do love that they're expanding the Welcome Hub with more of these animated backgrounds, the static ones, and just new widgets overall. So I would love for this ideally to get to a point where maybe they open this up and have an API where third parties can start making more customized widgets. But this one is very handy. I think this one would go into rotation for me and be something that's like the first thing I see for the PS5 landing page. So yeah, they're testing that right now. Shouldn't be too long until it goes live for everybody. Next up, let's just cover this news right away because it came out like an hour or two after LTPS last week, which was excellent timing, obviously. But Grand Theft Auto 6 has indeed been delayed to May 26th, 2026. So we do have a date, but it was delayed a little over a year out from now, basically. And so that happened, which is somewhat relevant just in that we had a story about Borderlands 4 getting moved up, and that was not related to GTA 6. And the thing is, most people know, like, or at least understood, publishers do always look at where they align their products. They're both owned by Take-Two, so it's like, yeah, Randy's probably lying. Okay, we give, well, I certainly owe Randy an apology, and I think most other people do. But the point is, that was still a huge delay, right? It was not really surprising, but it did get confirmed. And then on Tuesday, we got trailer 2 for the game, which you don't need me to tell you that this is such a big entertainment icon that people are really, really waiting for. And so it blew up like crazy, no matter where you looked as far as social media goes. You saw the trailer, you heard about it. The metrics for this game is through the roof. It got nearly 500 million views across all sort of segments within 24 hours. And the bigger news is that the game can now be wishlisted on PlayStation 5. And that trailer was captured on PlayStation 5, which Rockstar went out of their way to reiterate that it was indeed captured entirely on a base console with equal parts gameplay and cutscenes, because it does look incredible. It looks fantastic with a lot of Rockstar's in-house tech. And this being a very CPU-bound game, open world, it looks incredibly impressive. And it's very clearly the byproduct of what is a product that is taking so long to put together. But when you have that many resources to put into it over what has been such a long development cycle, you are going to see something that is, quite frankly, an outlier. And this game, by every metric, is an outlier for what is going to be the biggest entertainment product launch when it does end up happening next year, if it does happen on May 26th. Because again, the delay is not really shocking. I was certainly hoping, like many others, that maybe it does come out like near the end of this year, if only because my prediction for PS5 sales was heavily factored into if GTA 6 comes out this year or not. But it's really hard to predict sales nowadays, given that there's just so many economic uncertainties happening, obviously. But yeah, the game is running on PS5 in this trailer. It does look unbelievably good. I'm a huge Grand Theft Auto fan myself. I know we don't talk about this stuff too often on LTPS as far as a particular third-party news story goes. But the PlayStation business is like, that's the big deal, right? Sony probably does have marketing rights, we would think. I mean, that's sort of the theory running into this the entire way through, is that they've been very cozy with Rockstar for these console bundles and marketing rights for prior GTAs. And so if they have that for this game, it's going to be very good for them. Just ideally, you'd want this game to come out by May 26th, and that way while the console prices maybe are going to still be the same from that point on, we don't know. But yeah, there's also a really cool little pop culture reference in the trailer, which, I mean, it's typical Grand Theft Auto, where there's like a fake PS5 on the countertop when Jason was watching the Ammunition commercial, and there's like little fake DualShock 4s on the counter. They've got a name for those like fake consoles in the Grand Theft Auto universe, but it like very clearly looks like a PlayStation 5, which was very funny to see. But yeah, GTA 6, it seems like we'll have to wait at least another year, and now every other publisher can indeed breathe a sigh of relief knowing that, my God, we can now ship our game by the end of this year, or try to get it out by the end of this year, because there's still that meteor coming. Now it's in May, so we'll just have to be a little bit patient. But man, the game does look insane. That trailer was amazing. I've already watched it like 10, 20 times. I don't know, just obviously most people are excited, so I'm in there too. Moving on to some PlayStation business news, we now have a formal announcement of the Bungie incubation team that was spun off under PlayStation Studios, and that team is called teamLFG. And LFG stands for looking for group, not let's effing go, so that's not a great name, I would say, but this announcement did get posted on the PlayStation blog. As a reminder, this is the spin-off Bungie team that's working on Project Gummy Bears. And interesting enough, the blog post is from Herman Hulst. There's no one from the team itself that put their names on here, but the team does say, and I quote here, "Our first game is a team-based action game that draws inspiration from fighting games, platformers, MOBAs, life sims, and frog-type games. Players will inhabit a light-hearted comedic world set in a brand new mythic science fantasy universe. We can't wait to reveal more. Till then, we'll do our best. Thanks for reading." Now, I'm pretty sure that's the exact same description that Bungie gave on their Twitter from 1 or 2 years ago when we heard about this incubation project called Project Gummy Bears, and that's the recap. Like, we know of this game and that it is a MOBA, lo-fi, cozy aesthetic style game that might draw inspiration from Smash Brothers as far as like having maybe a knockout system. It won't be a fighter, it'll still have weaponry from what we're hearing, just that it will be a lot more colorful looking, and that's the sort of aesthetic they're going for with this game. And there was a lot of enthusiasm at Bungie, and maybe that's why once SIE got involved, they decided to spin it off into a separate team under PS Studios. And now we have the formal announcement of the team. Like, they have a name, Team LFG. Still a bad name. Like, I see LFG, I want to say let's effing go, like probably most people that are watching this right now. But yeah, so the headlines obviously came out as far as it being like, oh, SIE cancels live service games and they're making a new studio. But, you know, if you've been following the channel or something, then you probably know we've heard about this game for quite a bit now. It's just that we've now got a name for them, which is somewhat similar to what we saw with the Jason Blundell team, in that I guess the curiosity there was, will we see this team get announced when they finally show the game, or will they do something kind of weird and unusual? And that's the route they took, where Jason Blundell just confirmed it on Jeff Gerstmann's podcast, seemingly out of the blue. Same thing here, kind of in a way, but it's like the PS blog, it's a little bit more official. I do find it very noteworthy that they're going out of their way to avoid attaching names to the team, maybe in the interest of when they're finally ready to show more of it. They don't want the team to catch all this flack like they saw with Firewalk and Concord. Might be a little bit more awareness as far as protecting team members when they're trying to do another live service game, if it does end up going south very fast. But I digress. We'll have to wait and see when they finally show us this game in a official capacity with a trailer, and we'll find out what a frog-type game really does end up looking like. Moving on to PlayStation XDEV, where there's been a very recent discovery of possibly a new team that Sony is working with for a new project, and so this was spotted on the PS Studios OT on Recent Era by the user Uzu Pedro, where somebody from XDEV was sharing job listings for the studio Stellar Entertainment. Now, they had previously only done this for Firesprite, and apparently it was only Firesprite, which is a very important distinction to make, and we'll talk about why in a second. But Stellar Entertainment has offices in the UK and the Netherlands, and they've previously served as support on Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, but they've also worked on Need for Speed Unbound, Need for Speed Remastered, Burnout Paradise Remastered, a lot of racing games, and so they are indeed working on a new AAA arcade racing game built in UE5. So the reason why that distinction is important is that it's very commonplace, certainly nowadays, where when people are sharing job postings, that doesn't always mean it's because they're working on that project or working with that studio. Especially in the context of there's been mass layoffs, people are networking their friends, they're pointing other friends to these job postings. That happens all day, every day. But context is still everything. If it's somebody that's at XDEV, let's say they only ever share job postings with studios that they're working with, like Firesprite, for example, where they're internal now, they were external at a certain point. They're working with this team right now, or rather this team was previously working on an SIE project. So it does telegraph quite a bit that maybe there is something going on there, and potentially Stellar Entertainment is working with SIE right now on this racing game, which who knows what that could be. That's where speculation could run wild. And I know right away, the sort of immediate thought is, oh my God, is this a new MotorStorm? And believe me, I would love for that to be true. But we're just going to leave it there for now. This just happened, so it very easily could be disproven by the time you're watching it, or cleared up, or maybe we learn more. So we'll just follow this rumor very closely, because this would not be the first time where we hear about a new XDev project this way. And so there's many projects we don't know. That's why we'll follow this one and see what happens. Next up, the Death Stranding 2 previews have gone live. We were expecting these on May 8th. It did happen, and there is a huge blowout. We know a lot more about this game because the press had a very healthy amount of time with it, up to 30 hours basically over 4 days, which, one, that shows a lot of confidence from SIE and Kojima, but two, we also know that's only like 30-40% of the actual game, so there's still a lot more that we don't know. But there's that, and what we can also say, first and foremost, is that over on the PlayStation blog, we got a much more easy to digest plot synopsis, so we'll just go over that real quick, where it says, and I quote, Death Stranding 2 on the beach is set 11 months after the previous game. Sam Bridges, now living a quiet life with his BB, Bridge Baby Lou, finds himself in Mexico following a request from Fragile. In Mexico, Sam gets caught up in an incident that eventually brings him to Australia. There, he must take on the Herculean task of traversing across the continent to, once again, reconnect a fractured society. So there is a lot to digest from all the different outlets talking about their experience with the game. We'll just go over some of the key points that seem to be very similar across everybody's experience. So we are hearing that the story unfolds a lot faster in this game, and you get access to new equipment and structures earlier as well. And there's also a very similar Final Fantasy XVI time lore feature called the Corpus, so you can use that to wrap your head around, what's going on in the story. I love that from 16, so it's great to have it for a game like this, where at any moment you can bring it up and remind yourself who this character is, their relationships, or the setting you're in, certain terms they're using. It goes a long way in a story like this, so that's excellent. As far as playing the game, there's a much bigger focus on weather. So as we've heard before, natural occurrences like floods, heavy winds, earthquakes, wildfires, they can make your deliveries a lot more challenging. It does indeed sound like there's more combat, so using gunplay against humans and the BT bosses, but there is still that option to use stealth, and in a way it sounds like most of the combat can be avoided. So as far as if it has a bigger focus on combat, it sounds more evolutionary, not revolutionary. The game still sounds pound for pound like DS1. So there's, I guess that kind of clears the air as far as how much different it's really going to be. There is also a skill tree where Sam gains proficiency for certain gameplay elements. So that could be things like Sam's stability during traversing on foot, or stealth in combat, things like that. The Strand experience is very much expanded upon, so the type of travel infrastructure you can build now includes a monorail system. You're building out all these structures, still gaining materials, and you're gaining likes and sending likes for running into that occasional really long ladder across a river or something. And it's also important to note that everybody playing the game on, the ones that were playing the game, they were playing on base consoles in performance mode, and it seems like no one really had any complaints about that 60 FPS target. And the game, of course, looks fantastic, so pound for pound, there is a lot out there to digest, but those are some of the key points that I kept seeing, and those stand out to me a lot in that it sounds very much like the, somebody framed it in a way where it's like, it's more Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom, not something where it feels like it's dramatically different, but there's also been a lot of parallels being drawn from like an MGS1 to 2 experience, or a lot of elements from MGS3 or 5 are taking place in this game. And there's still like a whole back half of the game that the press did not see, because it sounds kind of nutty that they played so much of the game and there's still another, 60-something% left to experience. So it sounds good. It sounds great, actually. I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it being more of DS1. I think I would have definitely been intrigued by the prospect of maybe they're trying to focus a lot more on combat in such a way that, maybe deviates from what the DS1 experience was. But if they're playing it a little bit safe in that regard, that is a-okay with me, because that is what's so special about DS1, is that it's really not this sort of action-focused game at all points. But it does seem like they're making the BT counters a lot more impactful, and maybe raising the stakes where there's there's different kinds of BTs you can run into, which I think is also exciting as well. But that, and also you can use if you encounter new music in the game, you can now start playing that at your leisure. So you have to advance the story to a point where you gain more of those tracks, and they're not saying what tracks are in the game just yet. But once you earn those, I guess you accumulate them, and you can now play those at your leisure when you make other more basic deliveries, which I think is an excellent addition to the game, and really leans into the experience in a way that DS1 didn't necessarily do, because it kind of robs you of that once you have the initial tracks kick in for the big moments of the game. Hi, Melissa. So overall, very excited for DS2, and man, that game's coming up very fast. I gotta wrap up my playthrough of Rebirth. This is getting stressful, because I also want to play Clair Obscur as well. In other Death Stranding news, we are hearing from Kojima that he does have a concept for a third game, but it will not be him that does it. So one element of DS2 that we're hearing about is called the Plate Gate, and that's the in-game portal that Sam uses to travel to another continent. So when speaking during a Q&A about a possible sequel, Kojima said, and I quote here, "If I use this Plate Gate concept, I could make endless sequels. I, of course, don't have any plans to do that, but I already have a concept for another sequel. I am not going to make it myself, but if I passed it on to somebody else, they could probably make it." What's noteworthy here is that we know the IP now belongs to Kojima Productions, so this is not really the case where we can say, oh, Sony owns the IP, if they want a sequel, they'll find somebody else to do it, even though in cases like that, we've seen time and time again, Sony will put down IP and respect the original developer's vision for the story and plot. Sometimes they don't do that, but in recent years, they have been a lot more careful with revisiting older properties, but that's not going to apply here. Kojima owns the IP, and they can do what they want with it. So if they want to do a third game, I think that's sort of the read here, is that I have a concept, maybe I would give it off to somebody else if we want to really pursue that. Because, where Kojima is in age and the kind of things he wants to do and create before he leaves this planet, I'm sure he's got his plate full. And so I think he wants to wrap it up with DS2 as far as what he's willing to say and tell in this game. Now, we should also mention the very expected, but still very cool, Death Stranding 2 DualSense controller, which was announced as well. So pre-orders go live on May 22nd. The controller comes out the same day, June 26th for the game. There's going to be limited quantities, priced at $84.99 USD, €84.99 Euro, £74.99 pounds sterling, and it's going to be available on PS Direct and participating retailers. I'll say this. I think the DualShock 4 DS1 controller was a lot better looking than this. I don't know, just black and having these like yellow accents on it. They've done better, so I'm not super jazzed about the controller, but if you are, then the pre-orders will start towards the end of this month. All right, moving on to some other PS Studio news stories, beginning with the Returnal PS5 Pro patch, where we now have more details on that patch from Digital Foundry. So it is indeed up to 1700p, 1728p to be exact. It is still a dynamic res, uses DRS now. Pretty much all the visual effects and technologies remain unchanged, so no ray traced reflections or shadows like we saw on PC. That was pretty obvious from some initial runs that I was going through, but the frame rate does seem generally stable across what we're hearing is the first 3 biomes. There are some circumstances where it can dip in more taxing scenarios, but those dips seem to be in the 50s, and the Pro can usually hold 60 in more areas where the base console could not. Which is funny. It's so hard to, I guess, judge frame rate from just visual analysis, right? And the game is very RNG based as far as the rooms you get and the scenarios you're placed in with what spawns in the rooms. There were a few cases where the runs I did, I'm like, I don't know, it seems like it's kind of fallen into the 50s more frequently than what would happen on the base console, but that could just be chalked up to, the RNG of what I was placed into at the time on Pro versus the base console, because the base machine can have the same scenarios, obviously. But it sounds like, generally speaking, it does hold the frame rate just a bit more consistent than that base console, which is nice to see. I still would have loved to have like a high frame rate mode. Maybe they will eventually get to something like that if they play around with it a little bit more. But I don't know, this kind of reads like almost a sunsetting of updating Returnal, because they're going to be full steam ahead on Saros at this point, obviously. But still cool to get some more details on that patch. Next up, Ghost of Yotei's Deluxe Edition, which is $80 USD, is actually outselling the Standard Edition on the PlayStation Store in the UK and the US. This was pointed out by Push Square, and I thought this was noteworthy in that, as much as the $80 debate has been a thing, and it's obviously it sucks when games get more expensive for that sort of minimum entry price point, you do have these average selling prices for a lot of games. They have been in some cases over 70 already, because other editions are sold for these games, and a lot of customers will be ready to pay more when it's a game that they're super excited for. So just one of those food for thought things, especially given that it is the average selling price that a lot of publishers look at as of late, especially when they sell $250 collector's editions, and depending on how many of those they sell, their average selling price for their games on day one is exceeding $80. Now that's an average selling price, obviously, and that's how that works. But it shows that they do tend to zero in on that metric in particular. So it's just one of those silly things to see where it's like, oh, well, yeah, Yotei does appear to be charting on the PS Store, and the $80 edition is above the standard one. Next up, the inevitable news story, Gears of War Reloaded, coming to PlayStation 5 August 26th for $39.99 USD. Only the first game, but it does include all the DLC, so not 2 or 3, but first game, all DLC, 4K 60 FPS in the campaign, 120 FPS in the multiplayer. You will be able to play local 2-player co-op as well. It's being co-developed by the Coalition, Sumo Interactive, and Disbelief, and the PS Store listing for the game does mention it will be PS5 Pro enhanced and support the DualSense haptics and triggers. So there we go. We just talked about all the Xbox properties and when they're coming over. Gears, it was a matter of, oh, is it going to be a collection? Which really is more of a Gears problem, because Gears 2 and 3, Microsoft still has not done anything with those games. So if you're on the Xbox side, then you know that for the prior remaster, you're grandfathered into this one if you have the game digital and you bought it before the announcement on May 5th, if I remember correctly. But all that's going on there. Only Gears 1, but it was everything up to this point, right? It's been kind of shocking and crazy, the Sega moment, as we say. Everything so far has still, I don't know. It felt very weird, despite all of that, to wake up and then see a PlayStation social media account with Gears of War imagery and it coming over and confirming it. And I mean, it felt very weird. So now we're just waiting on Halo. Well, Halo and I guess Fable 2, if we're talking about the 4 horsemen here. To me, it's like Fable, Forza, Gears, Halo. And Forza is still like not the mainline motorsport game that's come over just yet. So like there's still things that have to come over. But there you go, Gears. Which Gears also notable because there's always that little factoid about how there's a Gears 3 build that was archived. The build was running on PlayStation 3. It was never meant to come out, but it was archived, years later, and now you can run it on tool PlayStation 3 consoles, and that's always been a really cool thing, but it came full circle. So Gears 1 will be natively shipped on PlayStation hardware. this summer. It's weird, but at the same time, we saw it coming. And hey, it's a great game. For many, it's a transformative experience that still visually holds up very well. It's great combat, great shooting feel. It's very heavy. It's such an iconic early Xbox 360 game that means so much to the identity of that platform, and now it is spreading its wings to PlayStation. That's just the world we live in nowadays. But you will be able to play that game very soon. Now with Halo, I still find like it might actually be a somewhat similar thing. I don't know if they would price it at $40, but I would think that they would piecemeal out the Halo games in a similar fashion and not do something quite to the degree of here's all of them packaged up in one go like the Master Chief Collection. Again, it's more of a Gears problem where it's particular as far as them not doing anything with 2 or 3, and that's really still a problem. But Halo is kind of the last big thing where that will be the really big, crazy story. More a matter of when, not if, I think. Now, I do also want to clarify a rumor about Gears of War possibly getting a disc print on PS5. So as far as physical video game news goes, initially we had a listing on a Spanish retailer site where there was a version for this game, PS5 and Code in a Box on PC. So there was PS5, PC, which that alone is kind of silly because Xbox would not be getting one. But that retailer did actually clarify on Twitter that they were notified that only those versions were coming out, and they were not 100% certain if the game was on the disc on PS5, but they think it does have the game on there. The thing is, that listing is gone. Those tweets are deleted. So I actually think they're not, well, at this point it seems like maybe we're not getting a disc print for the game, which that sucks because this has been a really annoying byproduct of Microsoft owning all these teams and these two big publishers. And, we're seeing a lot of disc prints either not happen or they come out and they're internet only or they're internet required with only a stub on the disc. And we might be seeing that again very soon with Doom the Dark Ages. It does have the clarifying little notification on the retail box that internet is required. And it's like, oh my God, we have 100 gigabyte discs on PlayStation 5. Surely the game probably can fit on that, because I think it is already showed up on PSN with 89 gigs or something like that. I don't know. It's just, it's frustrating. Everything that we're seeing so far is frustrating. And, obviously it would have looked very strange and a slap in the face to Xbox customers if PS5 got a disc but not Xbox. And we all know why that would conceivably be a thing, because PlayStation, at the very minimum, they would have the foresight of knowing, okay, PS5 customers on average buy discs a lot more frequently than Xbox hardware. So, that would have been fine. Obviously, I would still prefer every platform to get a disc print, and certainly for the home console, you got to respect it. But it seems like this is not happening. I would not bank on there being a disc print for the PS5 version. I hope I'm wrong about that, but we will watch this carefully and see if they do end up doing one. Now, in other Microsoft multi-platform news, we're also hearing from Bilbo Kuhn, writing for Deal Labs, that Sony is preparing a new Call of Duty Black Ops 6 PS5 bundle, where it would be disc and digital. They're not sure what the pricing would be. They're not sure when this would come out, but they do assume it's probably the standard $400 and $450 pricing structure, and it would be standard PS5 consoles with Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And that, I guess, is somewhat noteworthy in that we saw Microsoft make a very clear statement of there would be parity across all versions and all consoles, and that would still, I guess, be true. But as far as preference goes and these marketing deals and bundles, we all sort of thought oh, I guess that's sort of over for PlayStation, but not necessarily, given that clearly Microsoft wants to sell a lot of the game, and so even doing something like this, which, to even clarify further, Activision Blizzard, from how we understand it, they still get to operate exactly how they were operating. There's still that sort of corporate merging as far as the back end stuff, HR, payroll, all that sort of boring stuff. But, day-to-day operations and working out deals like this, it seems like there was just really no sort of disruption there. And so it's in Microsoft's best interest to allow those things to continue to happen, even if it's only a bundle, not necessarily marketing rights or anything, obviously. No exclusive deals or nothing, no extra content, but selling a lot of consoles and the game, and that game has a kickback for Microsoft. yeah, I can see how they would be perfectly fine with still doing things like that. And we know they've got a 10-year deal anyway, and this, that, and the fourth. So, yeah, it looks like the Call of Duty bundles, at least, are not going anywhere. Now, while we're talking about Call of Duty, that's a great segue to our next story, which is, if you recall, the FTC did file an appeal against the entire Microsoft ABK acquisition, which that closed back in October of 2023 now at this point. And so all these years later, we're now hearing that that appeal has been rejected. The deal's already closed, so we all kind of knew this thing was over, but we did hear recently the appeal was rejected. So the appeals court panel said, and I quote here, "First, pertaining to the console market, the panel agreed with the district court that the FTC failed to sufficiently show that Microsoft would foreclose or partially foreclose rivals after the merger, either by making the popular game Call of Duty exclusive to its Xbox console or by releasing only an inferior version of the game for Sony's rival PlayStation." The panel next found that as to the library subscription services market, the district court did not abuse its discretion by holding that the FTC had not made an adequate showing that the merger would substantially lessen competition because Activision Blizzard has long opposed putting its content on library subscription services. The merger's effect of making such content available for the first time in the subscription market, even if exclusive to Microsoft, would not substantially lessen competition. Finally, the district court did not abuse its discretion in similarly finding an insufficient likelihood of success on the FTC's claim that the merger would substantially lessen competition in the cloud streaming market, given that the FTC failed to show that Activision Blizzard content would be available to this market in the absence of the merger. Now, that's all true, obviously, and the thing is, everything is so different nowadays, and that Microsoft is shipping all their games on PlayStation, franchises that were historically only on Xbox, and so hindsight is everything, but yeah, it's all put to bed now at this point. We know where we are nowadays, and it is still funny, though, that like at the time, we all knew Sony's motivations, and I still think they were completely warranted, given that we saw from a lot of the things that came out of the court from Microsoft and Bethesda's internal communications that very much a lot of those games were intended to cut off their PlayStation 5 versions, and many did as a result of that. So the concerns were there, but it's so funny how quickly things change in just a 2-year period. In other multi-platform news, we did see from the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct that Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate was finally making the jump over to a new platform. And that was, a pretty big deal, just in that we never knew the conditions of Sony's exclusivity arrangement with Square. We know they extended it beyond the initial 1 year with just the 7 Remake base game on PS4, and the game just still has not gone over to other platforms years later. Well, anyway, now we're hearing that the Remake series is, in all likelihood, now opened up to all platforms. So recently on Nintendo's recent Creators Voice video, Rebirth's director Naoki Hamaguchi was discussing the Remake series, not just Integrate, but he was confirming that for Switch 2, and he thinks that Switch 2 will have enough power to run the Remake series. So he kept referring to it as the entire series, not just Integrate, which is the only confirmed game so far. So if it wasn't obvious, it seems like the all 3 games are eventually going to make their way over. I'm very curious what the third game will. I presumably it'll debut only on PS5 at first, PS5, PS6 by the time they actually show that game off. But what's the time delta here for like Rebirth and that third game to come over to Xbox and Nintendo? But yeah, with Square at least, it seems like they're probably done taking these arrangements from Sony for the foreseeable future. In fact, we can mention that for Square, there's one company that has acquired shares, and this company is somewhat hostile and asking for major changes from Square Enix leadership. So if anything, we might see some very big changes if that ends up sort of developing further. That's that's more of a Square story, if anything. But for now, that's what's going on with the Remake series. Moving on to some actually good news for the short term as far as $80 video games go, where we're hearing from EA that they will not be doing that right now. Very big caveat, right now they're not doing it, but we did hear from their latest financial call with the CEO, Andrew Wilson, where he said, and I quote here, "In terms of pricing power, our business is very different today than it was even just 10 years ago. In a world where everything we did 10 years ago was about selling shiny discs in plastic boxes and retail shelves, well, that's still a part of our business. It's a significantly smaller part of our business, and we now have pricing representing everything from free-to-play all the way to deluxe editions and beyond. At the end of the day, whether we're doing something that costs $1, or we're doing something that costs $10, or we're doing something that costs $100, our objective is always to deliver incredible quality and exponential value for our player base. And what we've discovered over the course of time is when we can marry quality and value together, our business is strong, resilient, and continues to grow. Now, the CFO, Stuart Canfield, also said, and I quote, "From a guidance perspective, we have reflected no changes in our current pricing strategy at this point." And so that's the thing. In the short term, nothing is going to change for now. It is EA. They're one of the last standing, very big publishers that is well known for being quite aggressive in the pricing portion of this discussion with MTX and deluxe editions and battle passes and paywalling things. So, I mean, not to be super pessimistic, but at least we know for now they're not changing anything, but that can move on a dime. So, at least for now, they're saying no, but gosh, I can't imagine that's going to hold true for too long if a lot of other games do eventually hit that $80 ceiling for their base games. Next up, we have some not so good news yet again for the physical video games market. This one is just more sales data where, yeah, it's still down, it's still going down. So this one is for the UK, where a recent report came out from the UK trade body, UKIE. Physical game sales are down 34% year on year. It's estimated that just 4% of total spending in the UK is for retail. Console hardware is also down 24% in 2024 compared to 2023, which that tracks with the normal decay curve of PS5, Series SX, and of course Switch. So that will be bolstered a lot for Switch 2 this year. But yeah, game sales for physical is still pretty rough. It's as we said with that other somewhat more recent story, and I believe that was also that data, was from Europe and the UK as well for a lot of physical software, and that it varies greatly on a title by title basis. Platform by platform, title by title, there are many cases where a game will do up to 50% physical. Nintendo is still 50% physical in those markets, which is insane that a lot of their third parties are now just going to be opting for these key cards for what is a brand new generation. So it's not like, we can always make the numbers seem small, but it's still a lot of software being moved. Moving on to Shuhei Yoshida, the former head of indies at PlayStation, former head of Worldwide Studios. Of course, he's still doing a lot of interviews, a lot of talking, giving some cool anecdotes. It got to a point where he was saying so many things, we just can't cover all of them. But if something new pops up and it's really interesting, we'll mention it. So this one was indeed a very new story where he even clarified with the French publication PlayStation Inside that when he was asked about one cool moment in his career, he said he's never shared this publicly. So it was about the first Gran Turismo and Kazunori Yamauchi. So apparently the game leaned far too much into the driving simulation feel, and Shuhei gave Kazunori some feedback on that when he first tried the game when it was in development, which Kaz did not really seem to take that too seriously. So they brought in 30 consumers to play test the game, and they all slammed into the wall on the first run. And so it was that moment that Kazunori said to Shuhei that he was right, and he loosened up the feel of the game and kind of didn't steer away from the simulation aspect, but gave it a slightly more arcadey feel so people would not just slam into walls right away. And so that's how we have Gran Turismo today. Shuhei said he feels as though he played a part in, really saving the franchise. What's so funny about that story, though, is that was my experience with my first Gran Turismo. I remember playing that game, and that was the first time I played a driving simulator, and I realized, I don't like these because I slammed into the wall right away. The feeling was so different from all the arcade racers I had played up to that point. Nowadays, I like cars, I like driving, and so I can play GT, no problem, but it's like even then, knowing what we know now, it's like I wonder how it felt pre-change, right, where it would have been that difficult to steer and move the cars around. But my experience on PlayStation 2, that was the first Gran Turismo I played, was I believe it was 3, not 4, but because it was so long ago now at this point. But I remember just slamming into a wall, and I couldn't control the cars. I'm like, why do the cars feel so heavy? And yeah, that's a really funny story though, and one where it's nice to know that Kazunori eventually did heed Shuhei's advice. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X. And if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all. And we had no Tuesday video. I was way too behind on a number of projects. Hopefully we'll be back on track for this coming Tuesday. We also have another Click R3 coming up on either Wednesday or Thursday. As a reminder, that's where the Last of Us HBO reviews are happening. Now, the last episode, John separated those for the video version. So on Spotify, it's the whole show with the review at the end. On the Spawncast Network channel, it was the episode, two uploads were separate. So the Last of Us HBO Season 2, Episodes 3 and 4 review was a separate upload. I don't know why I'm saying the whole thing, it's so verbose. But there was that. And then I'm not sure what we'll do for this week's episode. We might separate it again or something if it's too long of a conversation. But that will be our review of episodes 4 and 5. And that is pretty much it, I think. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me. And I will see you all next Friday.